Chris Cornell. He was an artist who was really defined by two massive, powerful forces. On one hand, you have one of the most iconic, unforgettable voices in the entire history of rock music. And on the other, a very private, lifelong battle, one that ended in a tragedy that still raises so many profound questions. So today, we're going to dig into both sides of that story. You know, this quote from Tom Morello, his Audioslave bandmate, it just nails it. This perfectly captures the essence of Chris Cornell. He was an artist who just refused to be put in a box. He was constantly pushing his own limits, always challenging what people expected of him, right up to the very end. And, I mean, that voice, it was just undeniable. From fellow legends to millions and millions of fans, everybody recognized its raw power and its unbelievable range. It could go from this soulful, gentle whisper to a full-on operatic howl in a heartbeat. It literally became the sound of a generation. So how do you even begin to understand the end of his story? Well, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. We need to trace this lifelong battle that was just raging inside of him. This incredible conflict between his monumental artistic gift and a set of really profound, deeply personal struggles. So, let's start there. We're going to dive into Cornell's difficult early years, a time where music wasn't just a passion for him, it was a genuine escape. It was his way of coping with a world that often felt incredibly dark and isolating. What's so powerful about this timeline is how it lays out these two parallel tracks running through his youth. On one side, you have this descent into a really deep clinical darkness, depression, anxiety, panic attacks. But on the other, you have the discovery of music. First, it was stolen Beatles records, and then, this is crucial, his mother buys him a snare drum, and it becomes his lifeline. It gave him a way to finally channel all of that pain into something else. And you know what? That snare drum wasn't just a lifeline, it was a launch pad. It led him to form a band with his friends. A little band called Soundgarden that would go on to help define the entire sound of the 90s. Now, the band's climb to the top was just relentless. This wasn't some overnight thing. It was a really steady, deliberate ascent from the gritty, local Seattle scene to total global domination. Each album was a step forward, refining their totally unique blend of punk energy and Black Sabbath-level heaviness. And all the while, they were playing with these crazy, complex time signatures that set them apart from pretty much everyone else. And the scale of that success, it's just hard to wrap your head around. 9 million copies. That kind of fame puts an unbelievable amount of pressure on anyone, let alone a group of guys who, deep down, still saw themselves as these outsiders from the Pacific Northwest. But here's the thing. Even at the absolute peak of all this success, tragedy was never far away. The death of his close friend, Andrew Wood, from Mother Love Bone, just devastated the Seattle scene. So Cornell channeled all that grief into Temple of the Dog, a one-off tribute project that became one of the most beloved, iconic albums of the entire era. It felt less like a side project and more like a sacred, soulful memorial. But, you know, all that pressure from fame, this feeling that their art was being turned into a product, and just growing creative tensions, it all eventually led to a major fracture. Soundgarden imploded, forcing Cornell to basically reinvent himself from the ground up. So when Soundgarden fell apart, it wasn't because of one single thing. It was this slow, painful burn. Kurt Cobain's death cast this dark shadow over everything. They watched their musical revolution get turned into a marketing gimmick. And Chris's own songwriting was just moving in a different, more personal direction. It all just boiled over in that final chaotic show. And yet, out of that total personal spiral comes this incredibly powerful new beginning. He teams up with the instrumental engine of Rage Against the Machine, and they form Audioslave. And it was this amazing fusion, right? You had Tom Morello's revolutionary guitar and that powerhouse rhythm section, but instead of righteous anger, you had Cornell's soaring, soulful, melodic voice. It was a completely new beast, and for a while there, they were one of the biggest rock bands on the planet. Okay, so after he gets sober, with a lot of help from his new wife, Vicky, Chris enters this whole new phase. It's this period of just incredible creative energy. He fully embraces being a father, he explores all these different sounds as a solo artist, and eventually he comes full circle, right back to his roots. And a huge part of that change was fatherhood. This is maybe one of the biggest insights into how he evolved as an artist. He talked about going from this nihilistic, who cares if I get hit by a bus attitude, to suddenly realizing he was responsible for other people. His lyrics, which used to be steeped in this dark, abstract poetry, started to show this more grounded, hopeful, and sometimes even fragile vulnerability. It was a really profound shift. And this quote, man, it perfectly explains what he was thinking with that really controversial 2009 album, Scream, which he made with the producer Timbaland. A lot of his rock fans hated it, but for Cornell, it was all about artistic curiosity. He was proving he was still that fearless artist, way more interested in following his muse than just meeting fan expectations. So then in 2010, the big news hits. Soundgarden is back together. And this was not just some nostalgia trip, you know? As Cornell and the rest of the band said, it was about taking responsibility for their own legacy. It led to a killer new album, King Animal, and this amazing period where he was balancing the heavy rock of Soundgarden with these incredibly intimate, vulnerable acoustic solo tours. Which brings us, of course, to the final, incredibly tragic part of this story. This section addresses the sudden and shocking end, and we're going to focus on the known facts from his last night and the very different perspectives that emerged right after. So what we're looking at here is the official timeline of events taken directly from the police reports. It traces those hours from his final performance on stage in Detroit to that frantic, worried phone call with his wife, and then to the devastating discovery in his hotel room. Okay, the toxicology report. This is absolutely vital for understanding the different arguments about what happened next. It confirmed there were several prescription drugs in his system, especially the anti-anxiety medication Ativan, and at a dosage that was higher than prescribed. But, and this is a really key detail, it found absolutely no illegal drugs in his system. So in the aftermath, you really have these three distinct narratives that emerge. You have the official ruling from the medical examiner, which was suicide. You have his family's deeply held, firm belief that it was an accidental death caused by an adverse reaction to his medication that completely clouded his judgment. And then, of course, you have other theories that circulated, which police investigated and found to be without any evidence. So, in the end, what are we left with? It's this incredibly painful paradox, right? How can someone possess a voice that connects with and empowers millions of people and yet still struggle with a private darkness that no one else can truly hear? It leaves us to contemplate the very complicated legacy of a man who was, all at once, a rock god, a poet, a husband, a father, and a deeply, deeply fragile human being.